For the last few weeks, I've been talking about sponsoring the podcast because as the show's grown, we've gotten contacted by a lot of corporations with big ad budgets, but I don't feel good about that. It doesn't feel like it measures up to the kind of integrity that I want to have. But I know that there's a lot of people listening to this who are out there creating independent businesses and projects, and you're trying to find ways to promote that doesn't feel like you're selling your soul. And the reality is if you're listening to this, then chances are the people who would be interested in what you do are also listening to this. And sponsoring the podcast is an excellent way to connect to those people. And I'm super excited about those of you who have already reached out. You're going to get to learn about some of our new sponsors very soon. But listen, there's only so many slots available, and they are starting to fill up. And frankly, people who are taking spots are renewing because they're seeing a positive impact. So if it's something that you've been considering, now's a good time to jump in. Go to jbrownyoga.com/sponsor. All right, it's time. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If you're new, let me welcome you. If you're returning, what's up, everyone? I'm coming to you from Jerusalem, Israel. I'm here visiting my dad. And those of you who were listening last week, you knew that already because I mentioned I was going to be here. And I thought that there was going to be some things that I was going to need to talk about with you regarding my dad. But you know what? I was wrong. You see, I had it in mind that there were some things I needed to talk to my dad about. Some things in me that I felt were unresolved, and I needed to confront him on a few things so that I could feel like there was some kind of closure to it or something. And they weren't going to be easy conversations. I'm not going to give you the details, but let's just say I was going to have to say some things that I knew were going to be upsetting to him, but that I felt he needed to hear. But when I actually got here and was with him in the same room and seeing what his life is now and seeing him just, for who he is as a person, not just my dad, I no longer felt the need. That actually what I thought was unresolved was already resolved. And there was no reason to try to confront him about stuff. It didn't matter anymore, I've forgiven him for it, and I could just love him. So, actually, it hasn't been at all confrontational. It's been pretty amazing just to see my dad. It's easy to lose sight of how important our families are. I don't know if you guys can hear that. He's got a bunch of dogs, and it's actually, I feel a little bit inhibited right now, which is unusual. I usually am very uninhibited in these intros and outros, but there's a chance that they could be hearing me right now, so that feels a little bit funky. It's like my dad's outside there, and I'm speaking to you in a slightly hushed tone. But it has been a wonderful time to see him. And you know what really has left me feeling kind of off kilter is ultimately I've been thinking about death, I got to admit. My dad's getting older, and I don't know the next time I'm going to get back here to see him, and I don't think he's going to be able to come see me, and I'm just sort of confronting mortality, which really is essentially at the heart of a yoga inquiry, if you think about it, but not necessarily the best way to introduce today's episode with Rachel Brathen. I have this amazing episode to share with you with Yoga Girl, and there's maybe all of these new people who are fans of Rachel's who've never been to the podcast before, and here I am. I'm introducing it with like this morbid consideration of death. That's not a great way to start. Well, listen, I'm here for just like one more day I taught a couple of workshops. Let me give a little shout out to my friends who came to the workshops here in Tel Aviv. They were very small groups, but there was a few of you, and you were here on the second day, and I'm sorry I don't remember your names off the top of my head, but I do want to reach out and thank you, because I know all three of you are listening, because they were seeming to me to be kind of diehard podcast listeners, people who've listened to like every episode. And if you're one of those people right now, if you're someone who has listened to every episode of this podcast and kind of listens every week, I just want to take this moment to tell you that I'm so grateful. You know, when someone comes and tells me about how listening to this has been a meaningful thing in their lives and kind of helped them through a particular hardship or something, it just blows me away. Because, you know, here I am. I'm just like sitting here in this room, like contemplating death and trying not to have my dad hear me. And I'm just like working through it. And I'm doing it for me, really. I do this for me more than anyone else. And that someone's listening to this right now, and it's having some kind of meaning for them and being of help, of comfort, anything at all, it just restores all my faith in humanity and makes me feel like a, I don't know, a useful person. So thank you. As always, don't hesitate to reach out and shoot me an email sometime if you're ever inspired. All right, as I mentioned, I have an incredible episode to share with you today with Rachel Brathen, aka Yoga Girl. But before I tell you about it, I want to say something about a topic we've been discussing on the podcast a lot. You've heard me talking about exploring new ways of making a sustainable living as a yoga teacher. Well, one of the key elements to this is that independent yoga teachers need an independent way to collect payments directly from the students that support them. Whether you're setting up your own classes and you need a way to let people use credit cards, or you're doing online stuff and you need to set up regular monthly automatic payments, today's sponsor, MoonClerk, is the answer. As many of you know, I've been doing this myself for the last year and a half or so, and after trying out most of the options, I decided to use MoonClerk, and I'm incredibly excited that they've decided to sponsor the podcast, because I couldn't be happier about choosing MoonClerk. Not only do they provide the functionality that you need, but they do it in a seamless way that makes it super easy for everyone involved. You can start accepting recurring and one-time online payments in 5 minutes with MoonClerk. And even better, you can get your first 2 months free when you use promo code JBrownYoga, all lowercase. That's 2 months free with promo code JBrownYoga, all lowercase. Go check it out. Go to moonclerk.com. Now, maybe you're not to the place where you're like trying to collect payments from people. Maybe you're in teacher training and you're just developing your practice and your teaching, and you're looking for continuing education. Maybe that's why you're listening to this podcast. Well, I want to also say something to you about yogaanatomy.net. Most of you have heard me talk about them before. They've been sponsoring us for a while. It is the online education resource of Leslie Kaminoff and Amy Matthews. They're the co-authors of a very well-known book, Yoga Anatomy. A lot of us had it in our teacher training. Well, listen, they have this incredible fundamentals course that you can plug into a teacher training if you do teacher trainings, or you can just take it as continuing education. It's like a 20-hour course. It's incredibly informative and useful. I've used their stuff in my trainings. I've studied with them. They've been on the podcast. You should go listen to the episodes. If you or anyone you know is in need of some yoga anatomy study, or maybe you just want some deep yoga learning, I highly recommend going to yogaanatomy.net. So let me tell you something about today's podcast with Rachel Brathen. It came about because of a thread that was happening here maybe a few months back. I was talking about how I got some criticism from people over comments I had made about Instagram yogis. they felt that I was talking down to them and that Instagram can be this, really powerful platform and there's real yoga happening there and you shouldn't talk down to people on Instagram. And so I thought to myself, well, who is like the epitome? Who's the biggest of the biggest Instagram yogis? And I thought of Yoga Girl because she was, as far as I can tell, one of the people who really pioneered the possibility of launching a yoga career off of Instagram. And I have to admit, I had some ideas about her. Maybe you guys remember when I had Tara Stiles on, it was like the same deal. Like, I remember getting an email from a PR person about Rachel Brathen, although I didn't know her name. It was just Yoga Girl's book. And I asked her about her book, but when her book came out, I got a PR email from someone about it. And I absolutely had bad feelings towards this person who I never met. I didn't know. I just thought, Instagram yoga, what's this fucking bullshit? I just thought, I remember being a dick about it when I got the email. I remember that. And I'm admitting to that out loud. I'm admitting this to Rachel, who's going to hear this. I didn't actually say it like this to her when we talked, but I'm saying it now. And I knew that if I were to just talk to her, like when I talked with Tara, that I had a feeling I was wrong. And you know what? I was wrong. That actually, not only did I have my ideas about her and what she did wrong, that in fact, she's super DIY. You'll hear we touch base on a lot of stuff we've been talking about on the podcast. And I was kind of surprised. She's got some views about social media that I didn't expect. So it was really great. It was great to have an opportunity to once again get past these ideas that we have about people that we see on the internet, When you really get a chance to talk to somebody, it's another story. And so I'm excited to share with you that story today. Real quick before we do, let me drop my stuff. I am going to be in Hamilton, New Jersey, February 9th. I'm going to be in Portland, Maine, February 23rd to 24th. And I'm going to be in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, March 16th. I'm going to teach a workshop in the afternoon. And then I'm going to do a live podcast event. That's March 16th in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. You should come. It's going to be fun. There'll be audience participation, and we're going to record, and it's going to be very fun. That's March 16th, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. You can find out about all of those gigs and more. You can listen to the archives of the podcast and read my blog and find all of my online yoga video stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I'm going to touch base with you on the other side. I'll tell you a little bit about next week's episode with Seth Powell. But for now, I think it's time. Let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation I had with Rachel Brathen.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Is this Rachel?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Forgive me for making you wait. I had us down for a little bit later than you, I think.
Oh, okay. She forwarded me 10:30. Was that not? I think it's 9:30 your time.
I know. I for some reason, I know there was some back and forth, so it may have been on my side, but I'm so sorry to keep you waiting.
Okay. No problem. I just so you know, I have about an hour, then I have to go get my baby at daycare.
I completely understand. I just left my wife, who dropped my 4-year-old off, and she only has like a half day these days. So I understand that baby pass and the tight frame. No worries, we'll be done in time.
Okay, cool. 4-year-old. That must be awesome.
It is. I also have an 8-year-old who's turning 9 next week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. They just get older and older. But it gets more fun because they come into their own as people too. And then that has such a mixed bag. I mean, it's great. It's amazing. But especially with my 9-year-old, and it's funny that we're even just we started talking about this right back because I just listened to one of your podcasts and you were talking about life-work balance.
Yeah,
And
if there is such a thing.
Well, but I was talking about that on my podcast this week too, because I just was traveling for 3 weeks, and it was like this amazing trip to New Zealand and Australia, which I'd never been to. And it was a fantastic thing, like for me on a lot of levels, very fulfilling. But when I got home, I had this like terrible feeling, like my daughter's turning 9 next week. And, I haven't spent a lot of time with her, especially this last year. We moved. There was a lot of stress with money, so I was just like, I've just been working my ass off. But I thought about, if years from now I ask her about this time, I heard her say, "Oh, well, you were never around, Dad." And I just it killed me, I was like, damn. Right. So it's like, to try to figure out how to strike that balance better.
I think about that all the time. All the time.
I mean, when they're really, really young, it's a little bit less, especially when they start to get older. It's like their lives slip past. I don't know. So anyways, I really related, and I completely understand. And also, it's really fun for me to get a chance to talk to you, honestly. We've never met before. I think we've got many mutual friends.
Probably.
But, one of the things that I've talked on my podcast a lot about is that part of me doing it was that I kind of came into my adulthood as yoga went from like an underground thing to a mainstream thing. Mm-hmm. And so I've sort of, I'm one of the generations who came to yoga before the internet.
Before the internet.
Before the internet. I really think that there is sort of a difference between people who came to yoga before the internet and people who came to yoga after the internet.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, probably not depending on how you look at it, but I found yoga before the internet in my life. Like I was really late with all of that.
I understand. Well, that's what I want to ask you about. That's what I want to ask you about. So here's the thing. So for me, it's, I think that as things have happened, and as social media happened, which really changed the game for everybody, there's been this expression, the Instagramification of yoga. And I've used it. But when I've used it, I was never thinking about people, you know what I mean? I was always thinking about like kind of the way things have happened in the market and the industry, and how, in the past, there was no social media, so that wasn't even a way that you could launch a yoga career.
Right.
And now, you are the prime example of someone who kind of did, as far as I can tell. I've talked with Sadie Nardini and Adrian Mishler. They used YouTube, They were sort of people who were able to launch yoga careers off of YouTube as a platform. And you're sort of, to me, in my mind, the epitome of someone who did that on Instagram, which is the one that I know the least about.
Oh, I have a lot of insight to share.
and then this is the last thing I want to say, and then I really want to get to know you a little bit if I can, which is, for me also, recently I experimented a lot with Instagram. So we did some campaigns for the first time, in the sense of I actually did selfie videos and things I'd never done before, right? And ultimately, we were kind of successful. We did see a big bump up in followers. But interesting. But at the same time, I did not see how those followers actually translate into real, even sales or connection. Sometimes I don't know if followers are worth as much as email addresses on your subscriber list, on your own, through your own web. So your own, you know what I'm saying? So that's just one aspect that I'm kind of interested in terms of how social media works. But the last thing I would say is, getting ready to talk to you this morning, I scrolled to the bottom of your Instagram feed. I wanted to see.
That must have taken a really long time.
It did. It took forever. I wanted to see what your first post was. And what was so interesting to me was to kind of see those very first posts where it was just you hanging out with your friends. It was very different. And then you could kind of see how things have evolved over time in your Instagram feed.
Yeah. A lot has changed. And now it's pretty far from yoga right now.
Well, that's interesting.
Or far from asana, at least. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, let me ask you then, to sort of start us off, would be, when do you remember getting on Instagram?
I mean, it was 2012, sometime in 2012, I know. I was really, I lived in a shack in Costa Rica on the beach. I worked as a bartender, had kind of, found the love for yoga and meditation a couple of years earlier and was living this lifestyle that's very different from the way it is right now. My whole goal in life was I just wanted to practice and, make enough money to feed my dog every day. Like that was my goal, my big career goal in life was just to live on the beach and practice every day. That was it. So I didn't have a smartphone. I was the last one among all my friends to have a smartphone. I didn't have a computer at the time. 2010, I went to Aruba on just a vacation, family vacation with my dad, met the love of my life, or Dennis, who's now my husband. And when I flew back to Aruba, I actually called him from a payphone on this little dusty road where I lived because I didn't have a phone to call. And I would use the internet cafe to send emails to family and things like that. So I was very late to the idea of social media or that kind of technology at all. And when I moved to Aruba to be with him, I started working for this wellness resort. And I started dabbling a little bit with Facebook for the hotel to try to attract people to my classes and to try to build a yoga community basically on the island, which didn't exist. And somewhere from there, I don't know, a couple of years later, Instagram came along and I started an account, named it Yoga Girl, just because I was so into yoga. I was teaching 20 plus classes a week. I was living, breathing the practice. That was it. But it was very much a personal thing. It was just a way for me to, connect with my friends and family and no plan. It was really early in the Instagram stage. So I think now people, they maybe go on social media with a plan to create something or to build a business or to create a name or a brand, or that was just not the case for me. And
actually the algorithm is different now than it was then.
I mean, everything is different now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, you were teaching a lot of classes. So what kind of yoga practice were you teaching? Like, where did you do your training? What was your kind of your approach in practice?
Yeah, I think I was really blessed to find the practice at a really young age. And it was the age, sometimes I get a little nervous about, the idea of people that make their way to yoga through the online world, which is, of course, it's a great way to reach a lot of people. And it can be a beautiful tool to use for connection, but it's also a very skewed idea of what yoga is. So when I found the practice, it was just me and a teacher living in the jungle, that has no name, no following. And I got to really just explore my body in the sense of what yoga really is without the idea of what it looks like, I think. So my first, I have scoliosis and I have suffered from really intense back pain since I was a teenager. So my first teacher was a Hatha teacher with an Iyengar background, and it was really so supportive with so many props. And I practiced chair yoga were some of the first classes that I took. And I had this first year of practice that was really restorative and really calm and really healing for my back. And I had so much pain, I couldn't touch my toes. I would be always nervous to bend over to tie my shoes because I would do something, not know what, and then my back would snap and I would go into spasms. Since I was 13, I had that in my body. So it took, I think, at least about a year before I felt confident to really move and feel free. And then from there, I found Ashtanga and I dabbled in that for a while. And then my first experience with what was called then just a vinyasa or a vinyasa flow, this more freestyle flowing type of class. I just loved it. And took a training that was based in vinyasa and then another training. And
this was in Costa Rica or Aruba?
Both. So I took my first training in Costa Rica and moved to Aruba. And I became the yoga director of this wellness resort. So I got to invite teachers from all over the world to do trainings at the hotel. And it was a really good gig for someone who was just starting out.
And especially you get to be in on those, I bet. You get to learn from them.
Yeah. Oh, it was really beneficial.
It's like doing the podcast. I get to talk to really smart people and talk to them and learn stuff. It's a great idea.
A free education.
Yeah. So you're doing that, you're running these programs at the hotel. And is that when you started the Instagram account?
Somewhere around, I think a year after that, a year or so into that, I started the Instagram account. And it was just, I think you just told me you scrolled to the first.
Yeah. It was just like, it wasn't, again, it seemed more like when Facebook was first starting and I was connecting with my old high school friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it felt like. But then you could start to see at one point where like you see the first one that's obviously, to me, seems like a professional photo. Where like it's like you're in a very cute, perfect outfit and the lighting's all perfect. And I think, oh, that's different. Who took that shot? So when did that happen? Like how did it go from you just being a grassroots yoga teacher, grinding it out 10 classes a week, or then now you're at least running these programs and bringing in these smart people, to suddenly your Instagram account becomes something that is more than just you and your friends hanging out?
I mean, it was pretty organic because I could sense the interest from people that were following. I mean, when I had 1,000 followers, my mind was blown. Why would 1,000 people be interested in, looking at these photos or these kind of little stories that I'm sharing? And then it grew to 5,000 and became a little bit bigger. And I could just see the interest from the people that were following. They were asking questions about the practice. And
so how long did that take? I'm sorry to jump in, but how long did that take? How long did it take to go from 1,000 to 5,000? Do you remember?
I have no idea.
You don't remember
honestly,
time
because
frames?
I wasn't.
Because you're like at 3 million now. I'm like, how do you go from 1,000 to 3 million? How does that even happen?
I don't know. And I wasn't interested in that. It wasn't like, oh, how can I reach all these people? It was this strange experiment, I think. And I remember taking it upon myself. People were asking, oh, I have back pain. And then I thought, well, I had back pain. That's how I found this practice. How great that I can share with someone who's like in Dubai or other side of the world, which poses worked for me in the beginning, or what type of practice or teacher to look for. So I think I took it upon myself in the beginning to be this sort of educational space. I would share all the poses in perfect Sanskrit and the benefits of each one and contradictions, and
you were being a dutiful young teacher. I would have done the same.
Yes. Really hard.
Yeah, you were doing your best to teach. I get it. You were passionate about practice. It does transformational things for people, for us, and then you feel inspired to want to share that with people. I get it. And then the internet opens you up to like all these people, because you're like, those are kind of isolated places, Costa Rica and Aruba.
Aruba, there's very little people here. And I think my classes, where I would have 10 or 15 people in class, that would be a big class for me. Right. So to reach someone off the island was just it's a really nice nice thing to use. All
right. So when I see one of those posts that looks like a professional photo, is that a professional photo? Is that someone coming and paying you to take a picture to put on your Instagram feed?
No, I almost never did that. So it would be my husband taking a photo, or me going to the beach with the dogs, and I would lean my camera up against a rock, and I would, flow or do something, and then have, those photos taken with a timer, and then upload them. Wow. And I could find this connection pretty. I mean, it was really easy to see.
So those are really just you and your husband taking those pictures? There's no professional photographers involved?
No, years later, sure, if I would do when magazines and press and, it became a bigger thing, then I would use those photos. But I've never in my life paid a photographer to do a shoot with me for social media.
Wow, you guys are really good because they look like I guess that was the key. You guys made really nice photographs.
Thanks. I mean, we also live in a nice place. I think it's easier to do.
The lighting was great all the time when you were outside. Yeah.
I mean, we're on the beach and the water is blue, and there's definitely a plus with living on a Caribbean island at that time. I mean, it is an inspirational thing, or at least I think it was at that time too. Oh, this person is doing yoga on the beach, and I want to follow and take part, and all of this. And then it just sort of, it grew and grew. And it was pretty early. I can really remember this thing because if you're in the part of what, I don't know what to call it, the Instagram yoga community, I'm not really a part of that. So I'm friendly with a lot of people, but I'm not, I never did yoga challenges. I never did this kind of, all the things that I feel like most other people on Instagram doing yoga did really early. But I was really averse to the idea of telling people to, at the office, go do a headstand at the office, and that's the photo you have to take today to be part of this yoga challenge that all these people were doing. And I was kind of outspoken about that really early to my own community, that I thought, use this tool for inspiration, not for education or teaching. It's not a space to, you have this limited space to write a little caption and then a photo. It doesn't tell the story of this pose or doesn't prepare you for the pose. So go practice, take class.
So that is a transition, because you said at the beginning you were trying to give instruction, but at some point maybe you realized that platform wasn't the best place to do that?
No, I mean, I would answer questions, but I wouldn't try to teach.
Yeah.
So when someone asks, what's a prop I can use for this pose, I would try to explain. But then I realized really early that it's not a tool made for that at all. Mm-hmm. Even when Instagram came out with a 1-minute video, I mean, what are you going to teach in a minute?
I know. That's promos. That's not teaching necessarily, Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I think it's an important distinction, I mean, there's some things you could do in those little captions or those little posts, but there's a lot you can't do with them.
Yeah, most you can't do. Mm-hmm. And I think most of it, I mean, you can get someone really injured. Just that urge, telling them you're going to participate in this challenge for a month, where every month you post a photo of yourself in this pose and then have them be really advanced poses. I mean, just that I think is outright dangerous. And I communicated that pretty vocally. I'm a pretty fiery person, so I was really against that. And I think I put myself in a space where I became a little bit of the black sheep. Like I was never really invited to the Instagram yoga party.
Was there? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know there was an Instagram yoga party, but...
I mean, there is. I think most people that engage, they build a following off of each other, so they would partner up, and then you post about me and I post about you, and then trade people between communities. But I never did that. So I think the community I have is really different. It's not the same. You went
it your own way. I could understand that. Now, so when does your Instagram account actually become something that like maybe becomes a more business opportunity? Like when, because it seems like you were able to launch several businesses off of that. Or I should ask first, actually, when does it's got to blow up at some point? At what point does it hit that like crazy mark where you're like on the track to get 1 million followers? Like the only other person I've talked to is a younger guy named Pedro Luna, who has an account called Yogi Memes. He's up to 100,000. But he's just like a total grassroots guy, and he came in much later in the game. So I'm curious, like, when does it blow up like that? Do you have a memory of when it kind of went to that next place?
I mean, I think 2014, 2015, somewhere there. I can't remember the 1 million mark, but maybe 2 or something years later after I started the account. But by then I was sharing, 5 or 6 times a day and keeping this continuous conversation going. And I had the experience for the first time of, we went to Florida, my husband and I, and someone had asked, oh, you're in Orlando, I live here, why don't you teach a class? That would be so amazing. And the thought hadn't really occurred to me that I could go a random place in the world and then maybe use Instagram to sell a class. It was just this, I had never taught outside of Aruba and Costa Rica in my whole life. So I tried that out when we were there, and I remember Googling, Orlando plus yoga studios. And then I think I cold called 30 studios who all turned me down because I had no name. I had no credentials. They were like, how are you going to fill this class? And I said, well, I have this Instagram account. And they said, what? Like, what is that? Who are you? No, sorry. And it was really with no time in advance or anything. And I found this tiny little studio in the suburbs somewhere, and that took me in. And I think they had an intern or something that they brought to open the studio just for this class, because there was just no, they asked, how many people do you think are coming? I'm like, I don't know, if 5 or 10 people come, that would be awesome. I would be super happy. And then I think 50 people came, and the studio only held 30 something. So it was this moment where I realized, like, whoa, all these people, they came, they don't know me, they haven't practiced with me before. I could be any crazy person. I mean, how would they know really how my class is? But they're willing to drive all the way here.
They feel like they knew you from your Instagram account.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also, essentially it's a gamble.
Yeah.
But I think it's the moment when I realized, like, oh, what if we could do this and we can live this lifestyle where we travel and teach, and I use this platform as a way to build something. So after that, I started focusing more on going in that direction, I guess.
And so how does that change in your mind what you're doing with your Instagram account? Because, when I did this like campaign with my producer or whatever, what I realized was the people who were really effective at it were people who really embraced it as like almost like a personal diary or journal, you know? And me, I had all this like resistance to it. And it seemed to me like at the beginning, it was very much like that for you. You were very pure and sort of just like, this was like sharing things that were happening with your life in a very like, they're doing a diary. But once it becomes, oh, this could be a way for me to also, you know, potentially use what I'm doing professionally to, you know, make a living, that does maybe change it a little bit. And did that affect how you thought about your posting?
I had that moment, or I think a couple of months, where I was going in a direction that wasn't genuine to me, and that would involve, you know, several times a day posing on my self timer for a pose, feeling this pressure to share, and I had this idea like, oh wow, like this is really growing. I have to take advantage of this, and I've shared this in an interview before, but I remember having this very clear moment where I was having a really, really bad day. I was in a really bad place with my boyfriend, who's not my husband, but we were going through this really rough time. And I remember like, oh, I have to share something really great, something super inspirational, some great quote about whatnot paired with some, you know, photo. And I went to share that. And I remember it was just the opposite of what I was going through in life. And I had the realization of, wait, like this is totally inauthentic. This is just not at all what I'm going through. And I'm trying to inspire, but I'm not feeling that at all. So instead of sharing that, you know, positivity or, you know, green juice or handstand or whatever it was, I shared something about the fact that I was having a really hard time, and this is happening in my relationship and in my life, and it was really genuine. And the response I got was just not bigger in terms of engagement and numbers or likes or anything, but it was so heartfelt and real. And I remember feeling this spark of, wait, is there a way to have an actual connection to these people where I feel I get something really beautiful in return, where it's a conversation, where it's not just, you know, it's not a following or this social media thing, but it becomes a community. And it was a huge aha moment for me. And I never went back to that road of trying to market or have it be something commercial.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.